Morning. Good to be with you this morning.
All right, let's begin with what you're getting and your understanding of the situation on the ground in Sudan, particularly in Darfur at this time. What are you seeing?
So, in particular, are we in regards to the general picture in Darfur, or in regards to the landslide incident?
Let's talk about the general picture, and then we'll focus down into Darfur and the landslide.
Yeah. So, it's the picture in Darfur is extremely difficult at the moment, because what you have is particularly in Al Fashir, we're witnessing a siege, and that siege by the RSF is preventing at the moment any food from entering the city. So we have people, the population of the city, where you have something like 130,000 children who are on the verge of starvation. So the humanitarian situation is very difficult in Darfur. We are we are worried about and speaking frankly, ethnic cleansing happening in Al-Fashir. So we witnessed in West Darfur towards the end of 2023. We saw large numbers of ethnic Masalik being killed when the city of Al Jinana was overrun by the RSF. Now, if Al Fashir falls, we are worried, and this is the worry about people which I speak to within Al Fashir itself, that they and their families may witness some horrific crimes. And we're already witnessing that in the sense that individuals who try and leave the city to look for food, often what we're seeing is individuals being basically killed on an ethnic basis. So the situation in Darfur is extremely worrying. The most worrying situation is that Fasher right now, food isn't coming in, and on it to the point where people have resorted to eating animal fodder because it's the last remaining food available in the city. So I wish I had a positive story to tell you about the situation in Darfur. Um, but it's not a positive story at the moment. But what we need to do is raise awareness of the situation and how difficult it is.
And we'll talk a little bit more about the awareness part of it just now. You mentioned ethnic cleansing. I mean, this is genocide, isn't it? That's really the word for it. Particularly in a region that has witnessed this before in history. Why do you think the international community is not paying attention, especially in a region where this story has unfolded before?
I think we have a problem with African conflicts in general that they're quite ignored. So people witness these sort of atrocities happening in Africa, and they just consider it as normal almost. And we can't understand really why that attitude is. There may be some implicit prejudices that exist, but it doesn't generate the same level of outrage that we see in other parts of the world. And this isn't to say that other conflicts deserve any less attention, but there is room in the global consciousness to realize what is happening in Sudan is awful. And if we, in 2023, we saw the city of Jinena, we had 8,000 men and boys, because that's who they were targeting, being massacred. This is on the size of Srebrenica. Now, when you're getting the memorial for Srebrenica in Bosnia getting more attention than the actual atrocity as it's happening, you have to question how people consider atrocities in Africa. And I'm not just calling out the rest of the world. It's something within Africa itself. This hasn't been getting attention within the African continent itself. So if, for example, in South Africa, in Sudan, uh, the general population has been impressed about the position that South Africa has taken in regards to Palestine and Gaza, but we have not seen that same solidarity when it comes to Sudan. So, for example, South Africa is considered as a leader on the continent, and we've not seen a championing of that human rights in Sudan. uh, especially when it comes to speaking out in regards to the mass atrocities which are being primarily committed by one side, which is the RSF.
So, just to paint a picture as well about this humanitarian situation, it was already bad before the landslides, right?
Yeah. So the landslides are a natural catastrophe. The latest death toll I have, fortunately, is not as high as we were hearing initially. The initial figure we were hearing was 1,000. The most accurate figure I'm hearing now is around 370. It's awful, but it's a natural catastrophe. What we're witnessing on a daily basis, people dying of hunger, starvation, and it's completely man-made. So, in Darfur, we're seeing thousands of people who are being murdered. And that's not getting attention, and we've seen attention for this landslide, and that's great. But we would like to see attention for things that we can actually prevent. We can actually global pressure can be applied to end the siege on Darfur. I know people in the city of Fasher, and every time I speak to these people or I see images of them, they get weaker and they lose more and more weight. So we're witnessing a city being slowly starved to death, and I think that's where the primarily our attention should be focused.
What is preventing aid from getting into the city and people being able to leave?
So I have literally watched probably a dozen or so clips of people trying to get food into Al Fashir, being stopped by the RSF, and on some occasions, I've watched videos of them being executed for trying to get food into the city. The RSF has calculated that the only way for them to capture the city is by starving it to death, and that's what's happening. So food is not being allowed in. Um, and any attempt to smuggle food in can be a death sentence.
What needs to happen? Do you think an international force needs to be deployed, or because it seems that the national army is unable to cope with this insurgency?
It doesn't even need to get to that. I mean, there's enough. If enough pressure is applied in terms of sanctions, in terms of media attention, then they would be forced to open those routes. But at the moment, we're not seeing it being discussed in media. We're not seeing it being discussed in the UN. We're certainly not seeing it discussed in the African Union. So the first step before we talk about bringing in international troops or something, and that's such a really long process, which by the time if it ever comes to fruition, the city would have it would be too late to save the city. So I think the first step is actually getting attention to it and actually looking at the prospect of sanctions, or the money supply that supplies the RSF, actually pressure them to open up these corridors to allow aid in.
We're going to talk a bit more about the humanitarian efforts, particularly what you're doing. But I get a sense that you have a really good understanding of the political dynamics as well. So if I could just ask a couple of more questions. You said that the RSF are probably the main perpetrators of the atrocities we're seeing. Who is supporting them to commit this ethnic cleansing and this genocide? Because they certainly are getting resources from somewhere.
Well, it's been known for a long time. It's the UAE. The UAE supplies the RSF. It with weapons, with financing, even with medical treatment for the fighters. So, well, it's been well known that it's the UAE. But the UAE is a country with deep pockets, and for that reason, there's very few people, very few countries that are willing to speak out in that regards. But within Sudan, it's been clear for a long time, and the evidence there's been UN reports on it. There has been investigative journalists, and it's just there's parts of the evidence which are irrefutable. They have weapons that only are present in the UAE that have showed up with the RSF. So, for example, there's a UAE manufactured vehicles, fighting vehicles. You also have weapons that have only been sold to the UAE by other countries, and then they were transferred to the RSF. So the evidence is damning. There's little question about it, and there's not been much pressure. So the RSF could not be doing this by itself. It's in it at the end of the day, it's a militia. Without that level of foreign sponsorship, it could not do what it's doing.
I'm also hearing reports that the National Army sometimes doesn't step in enough, almost allowing the ethnic cleansing to take place.
Yeah, that's a very legitimate criticism, and it's been what a lot of the anger was in Sudan, especially in periods. There's been several incidences where the army has withdrawn, and the civilian population has been basically left to fend for themselves, and you've seen large massacres. Sometimes it's, for example, in Guinea, the army supply lines, they simply just run out of bullets because when it comes closer to Darfur, the borders are countries allied with the UAE or being funded by the UAE to allow arms to supply to the RSF. So sometimes these soldiers simply had to withdraw because they ran out of bullets. But a lot of the times there have been questions, there's been legitimate criticism and a lot of anger within Sudan when the army has withdrawn, especially without providing proper notice or an evacuation plan for the population within those cities. So the army in a lot of cases has failed to provide that protection. But at the same time, you have to acknowledge that a side that is failing to protect is not as the main problem is what it is failing to protect against, which is the RSF.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the humanitarian efforts that people like you are doing. Talk to us a little bit about the Khartoum Aid Kitchen, how it started and what you're trying to do.
So Khartoum Aid Kitchen, it just started out as a reaction to the realities I was seeing on the ground. So I was speaking to my cousin, who's most of my family is from Khartoum State, and he sent me a picture showing long lines of just people queued trying to get food, and he was explaining to me that the sort of because these were locally funded. For example, just people within the community who are also suffering the effects from war, trying to help their neighbors, that they weren't actually able to provide something that was nutritious enough to sustain them. So we decided on a pilot project where we would provide a fortified stew. We fortified that stew with peanut butter because it's very common in Sudan, peanut butter, and it's quite cheap, but it wasn't usually used mixed into stews. So and we served that with bread. So we provided complete meals, and that pilot project, which we started over 18 months ago, it was successful. So I went to I already had a small following on social media, and I contacted a friend of mine who was already fundraising for Sudan, and I told him, would you like to help me expand this? And he agreed, and then we set up what became Khartoum Aid Kitchen, and that quickly expanded, and it was at its height feeding something like 35 to 40,000 people a day.
I mean, that's an incredible effort. And now, because of what's playing out, it's getting harder and harder for you to be able to supply that assistance.
Well, this is the really difficult thing for me with El Fasher, because we used to have a kitchen that ran in El Fasher, but due to the twin facts of the kitchen was actually being directly targeted with shelling from outside the city by the RSF, and also the fact that we couldn't actually get supplies into the city anymore, that kitchen had to stop. So it's painful for us because we want to get we want to work in a fashion. We want to reestablish our kitchen, but at the moment we don't have a regular way of getting supplies in. So all it would mean if we set up a kitchen, we would just be trying to outbid um people in the city for supplies. So if there's a limited amount of grain left in the city, then just bringing in new money is just gonna just make those supplies more expensive. So we want to be able to bring supplies in and reestablish our kitchen, but we will only be able to do that once the siege on the city is lifted.
Difficult as it is, I know that another mission that you have is helping displaced families return to their homes. How does the program work, and what kind of differences has it been making?
That's a brighter spot in our story at the moment because since the RSF was forced out of Khartoum and Central Sudan, you have a lot of people who now feel it's safe to return. But they've during this war, a lot of people have lost everything. They don't have a single penny to their name, and they want to go home, but they can't afford the journey. So what we did, we set up a voluntary return program, and in that voluntary return program, we've returned thousands of families back to their homes within both Khartoum State and Jazeera State. And the majority of those has been internally displaced people from within Sudan, but we've also done a number of trips for refugees that were in Egypt. So this is a brighter spot in what we're doing at the moment. At the moment, we've seen something like 2 million people return to their homes in Khartoum and Central Sudan. That might sound like a large number, but considering that in total 14 million people were displaced both inside and outside Sudan, it really is an uphill struggle trying to get everybody back home, even if their region is now safe.
What are some of the stories that are coming through from people that have been able to return home? What have they been saying to you?
So it's interesting conversations because I have I try and understand the sentiments and how people feel, and to better judge our approach, and they I've a lot of these people while they've not been part of that same voluntary return program, but family relatives of mine, so who they've returned to areas which there's no electricity. There's no mains water, so they have to wait for a donkey cart to deliver water where they buy. They don't have cellular signal, but these people are just happy to be back in their homes. People have a connection with their homes that I think people only understand when they lose access to their homes. Even though there's still the services haven't returned, what we're seeing is that people are just happy to be safe in their homes. So in a lot of Khartoum, there are no services. There's literally no services whatsoever. But people are happy to be in their homes, back within their communities, and they have that opportunity to rebuild. And there was a point there people felt that they may never be able to come back to their homes. So they're grateful for that, but they are also waiting for the government to work to reestablish basic services.
In terms of support, you say that £30, which is about 40 US dollars, is enough to return an entire family home. I mean, this suggests that even the smallest donations can really make a huge difference.
This is the thing because we have very low overhead costs. Me and my co-founder, when we don't do this, we're not getting any money to do this. We're doing this because we have an emotional connection and we feel that we can help. And and most of the people in Sudan are volunteers. They're people just trying to help in their communities. And some of these volunteers have actually died in the process. We've actually lost people doing this volunteer work. So it's we because we have very low overhead costs, we can really stretch our money quite far. And it's also being able to have the local knowledge. Every person that works for us or with us is from the same local community. So when it comes to getting the best deals or someone, it's you can usually use those connections to try and get the most cost effective solutions. And so we're happy to be able to say that even with small amounts of money, even if somebody donates $5 or so, that your money will actually make a difference.
And perhaps finally, I mean, this is clearly a very personal mission for you. In the face of so much hardship, I'm wondering how you keep going, and do you have hope for the future of Sudan?
I keep going because I feel like I'm making a difference. I'm privileged to be in a position where I can make a difference. I most of Sudan, while you have some brilliantly educated people and so on, but they're not in a position where they can communicate with the outside world, especially when it comes to English forums and so on. Um, so I keep going because I bet even it has been difficult at times. It's been, it has consumed a lot of my time. But I feel that it's rewarding and that it does actually make a difference. As for my hopes for the country, I think the fact that, I get to see that, people return to their homes. It's something like 2 million people already, even though this is only a small fraction of the total number of people. I have hope that we can come to this war can end where in a way that is can bring security to people and their lives. So I have hope. We're already seeing improvements in much of Sudan, in central Sudan and Khartoum, sort of almost a post-war recovery. I just hope for the same situation to prevail in Darfur, where people aren't starving, where they aren't facing imminent death. So it's a cautious hope, but I believe that that hope can only come if you work for it. So.
Well, we wish you the very best with what the work that you're doing, the very important work that you're doing. Thanks so much indeed for talking to us. And as you say, I think this is a story that we need to keep telling and telling more and more. Mohanad, thanks so much for your time and the work that you do.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you. That's Mohanad El Balal, a British Sudanese national and co-founder of the Khartoum Aid Kitchen, feeding millions of families, grassroots, but very difficult at the moment given the situation in the country. And all he asks is that we tell that story and tell it loud. It's 8:30 and it's time for your news headlines. Here's Dwalani Tulongwepe.
SABC